Hey everybody, it's Michelle Malkin doing a Malkin live stream as promised. This entire week, I'm going to be coming to you at lunchtime with a specific focus on the Expand the Ban movement. We've got about 2 weeks for the Trump administration to decide whether it's going to extend and expand the current so-called immigration ban that was introduced by executive order thanks to President Trump. Now, I've been railing about this for the past 2 weeks, along with so many America First advocates talking about the deficiencies with that ban. And that's in large part due to Jared Kushner and the Forces of Open Borders Incorporated within the West Wing of the Trump administration. What's encouraging is that there are more and more grassroots conservatives, Trump supporters, independents who understand how influential and dangerous those forces are within the Trump administration. It is the epitome of the swamp. But unfortunately, and I've seen it, I think, far too often in the replies to my tweets and among so many Con Inc. accounts on Twitter and the rest of social media, and unfortunately even on places like Fox News, either a deliberate and willful ignorance about Jared Kushner's role, or even worse, I think, and more nefarious, a complicity in duping people about Kushner's role and his agenda within the administration. So to kick off this week-long live stream focus in the push to expand the ban, I have asked Pedro Gonzalez, who is the assistant editor of American Greatness and also a contributor to Chronicles magazine, to join me because he's done amazing reporting on Jared Kushner and a lot of the issues that are so important to the America First movement. He's with me now. Hey, Pedro.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for all your incredible work. We are just going to jump right into this. And like I said, we've got the 2 weeks until various cabinet members get to weigh in and recommend to President Trump whether or not to extend and expand the current immigration ban, which really only affects a small percentage of green cards being issued of people coming into the country. Of course, an entire category with many programs underneath it of temporary foreign workers were completely exempt. And back in March, you called attention to Republicans who were pushing to protect and expand one of these programs that was part of the carve-out of the immigration ban, EB-5. Can you talk to us about what you reported back then?
Right. So there were reports that there was an attempt to undo some of the good work that has been done with the EB-5. So this is a visa that was initially designed to bring foreign investor cash into the United States and ostensibly put it in places that need it. There's two kinds of investments. There's the standard minimum investment, which is a little over $1 million now. And then there is the targeted area investment, which is currently stands at $900,000. The targeted area investment is basically designed to will let you basically buy a green card, because that's what the EB-5 does, and then we'll take your money and we'll put it into a struggling area that otherwise wouldn't attract the investment. Well, since the program was created in 1990, 1981, and your book actually was something that I used to research this, sold out because you did a lot of the legwork on it before a lot of other people did. Since it was created, it's been just sort of like a racket. The money often doesn't go where it's supposed to go. It usually just ends up lining either a foreign investor's pocket or a broker's pocket, someone who finds these investors and then kind of fleeces them out of their money and then disappears. And then the people that get screwed every time, no matter what, are regular Americans. So the administration, there are some good people in it, and they've worked to raise the cap on the EB-5, the minimum cap. It was raised from 500,000 to 900,000 for the targeted area minimum. That was within the last year and a half or so, I think. Now, catching us up to March, Politico reported that there was an effort within the administration to reduce the investment minimums to levels that they had never been before, and to increase the number of available visas annually by something like, I think, from 10,000 that are available annually to like, let me see, I have the number. I think 75,000. Yeah, 75,000. That is just an insane increase, and the timing was also terrible. March is when we're getting these reports that there's this thing in China that's happening, that's coming our way, and 80 to 90% of these visas happen to go to Chinese investors. In China, if you have a lot of money, you're probably connected to the Chinese government. So this is just a bad program. And so with that one little line in Politico, I dug into it, and what I found was that while Lindsey Graham was sort of the public face of this thing, as he usually is, there were reports in Conservative Review. Daniel Horowitz's sources were telling him that Jared Kushner was actually the driving force behind this push to undermine the progress we've made on the EB-5 in March. That's according to his sources.
Right, and there were others as well. I believe that the Federation for Immigration Reform had also heard the same thing.
Right. Yeah, and that seems to be sort of the way that this works now, is that Lindsey Graham will kind of take the heat, like he always does, and people just kind of think, oh, it's just Lindsey being Lindsey. But then there'll be these kind of peripheral reports that Kushner is somehow involved in it, or he's just always happens to be standing next to it. So this is a trend that we're seeing with the EB-5, but also with other types of visas, like the high-tech visas.
Right. I just want to make sure that we are still broadcasting live, because my screen is frozen, so I can't get any feedback. Are you able to see that people are able to get it? Yeah.
People are still commenting.
They are. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see if people can hear both of us?
It says sound is good. We hear you. No video though. That's
okay.
A comment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's weird. My video is not working either. But if people can still hear us, I'm just going to continue.
Right,
I had tried to share a screen from one of your pieces, but so Kushner, of course, was highlighted by Trump, and he's being propped up by many prominent members of the conservative establishment. He's come under fire because of his botched attempts to rescue the administration with regard to its handling of the coronavirus pandemic crisis. So Trump did this dog and pony show and brought him up to basically extol his role in securing PPE and masks and all this. And what's interesting is that independent whistleblowers from both the left and the right have called attention to many of the conflicts of interest that are involved, because he's recruiting all of his cronies and even his brother, who heads one of these Silicon Valley type tech firms that does data mining on health data called Oscar Health, and bringing them all into the administration to quote unquote help with this effort, to make it look as if it's some sort of public interest initiative, when really it's exactly the kind of nepotism, culture of corruption, quid pro quos, that if these things had been done under the Obama administration, they'd be screaming about on Fox News every night.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think the real criticism with this thing is that, one, there's no transparency, and so you have states reporting that they actually don't know if they're getting supplies from this airlift. There's an article in the WAPO where WAPO actually did some journalism. They went and spoke to representatives in Connecticut, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, and everyone is just sort of confused. Like, there was one locality where people said, actually, we did get supplies from the airlift project, and give Kushner a break. And after the fact, they realized that those supplies that they got actually came from the Department of Defense, not from the airlift. And they had to correct themselves and say, well, the whole thing is so opaque that we thought we got them from the airlift, but we didn't. And I mean, look, part of the agreement is that we subsidize flights, and each flight costs about $750,000 to $800,000 for the companies that have agreed to bring stuff from China, which that's already, that's kind of a red, that doesn't make sense to me. We're in this mess because of China, and then we go to them and beg for help instead of developing the capacity to produce these things as quickly as possible domestically. So that's already, for me, a non-starter. But so we subsidize the flights for these companies to go there and bring stuff here on the agreement that they give half of their cargo to hotspots, which turns out it's really hard to figure out where these hotspots are because they're not being transparent about it. And then they can sell the rest of their supplies that we've subsidized them to bring into the United States at whatever they want, wherever they want, to whoever they want. But they're not telling us they're not telling us any of that information. So you're right, it is extreme nepotism.
It is. And, I have to support the efforts by some of these Democrats to investigate the handling of Project Airbridge. And really, it's an extension of the congressional probes into a lot of Jared Kushner's so-called public-private partnerships. Right. Bipartisanship is such a bane, right? When it comes to public-private partnerships. And in the piece that you did for the National Interest that was published May 11th, the coronavirus pandemic is a many-headed hydra, and immigration is one of them. You come back to EB5 and highlight this is so key, right? This is what. I don't care if you're left, right, or center media. This is what journalism should be, which is about following the money, finding the truth, connecting the dots. And you highlighted many of the real estate groups that are sitting on the Trump Great American Economic Revival industry groups. Tell us about those.
Right. So there, if you haven't seen it, there's the White House has this website for these groups. I just kind of call it the Reopen America panel, because that's the idea. It's these big companies that are going to help America reopen, and they're like industry leaders, like Verizon and Qualcomm, Bank of America. You're already like your spidey senses should already be tingling, and right. And so for the industry groups, I know that the EB5 is typically used to fund like development projects, and usually not like development projects in neighborhoods that are struggling. It's the money usually goes to build like luxurious high rises that you and I and most of the people listening can't afford to rent out. And so of the 9 groups that are listed on the White House's website, at least 4 that I could find have funded ritzy development projects with EB5 cash. And those are Vornado Realty Trust, related companies, Starwood Capital Group, and Witkoff Group. And Vornado, of all these, at least Vornado has a tangential relationship to Kushner. In that Vornado, Kushner worked together on a project that part of the plan, it fell through, but part of the plan involved getting a record amount of EB5 cash to fund development.
Wow. And how about the others?
The other companies, so related companies, used a ton of EB5 money to fund in total, it was a $25 billion development project in Manhattan's West Side. Witkoff Group raised about, I think, 80 million total to build a really nice commercial building with a hotel and residential condominiums on Manhattan's Lower East Side.
Nice.
Right. And I mean, I would encourage people to look into Starwood, just because Starwood is one of those companies where it was really hard to kind of figure out where the head and where the backside of Starwood is, because they have all these different subsidiary companies, but Starwood used EB5 cash to partially bankroll in the past a hotel in Vegas, a hotel and casino in Vegas, and a hotel in Hollywood. So again, these are projects for the jet set, not for the people that at least initially was supposed to benefit from this.
Right. That is so important, because when the program was created in 1990, it was all about curing blight, right, in the heartland. Right. And it was sold as this job creating, economic recovery inducing investment win-win arrangement. And so many of the America Lasters, the open borders types who've been pimping this over the years, including the likes of Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA, I almost call it Talking Points USA. The Cato types, what have you, have promoted it as a way to, bring the best and brightest job creating minds, largely from China and India, who use it as an easy way to buy passage into the country and get U.S. citizenship, path to U.S. citizenship for their kids, which allows them to get in-state tuition discounts at the institution of higher learning of their choice. But you have underscored something that is an incredibly important point, particularly at a time when more and more people are understanding that, open borders threatens every aspect of our lives, not least of all public health, which has, been at the forefront for several months, but also national security. So I wanted you to tease out for people the national security implications of EB5.
Right. So again, 80 to 90%. I think right now the number is 80, but it's been as high as 90, and it bounces between those two figures. But the agreed upon number, I think, is around 80% of these EB5 visas go to Chinese investors. There is no such thing as a private company in China. There's no such thing as a private investor in China. In 2017, China made this concrete with the National Intelligence Law. And Article 7 of that law eliminates any distinction that might have existed before between private and state-owned companies. And I'll read it. So Article 7, National Intelligence Law: any organization or citizen shall support, assist, and cooperate with the state intelligence work in accordance with the law, and keep the secrets of national intelligence work known to the public. So if you're a private person in China, as much as you can be, even if you really do, want to use your money to just grow your business and do well for yourself and your family by coming to the United States, you don't have a choice but to work with the Chinese government if they tap you. And that's not just the EB5. That's true for anyone that is coming to the United States from China. So it has nothing to do, because the left, probably even some Republicans, frankly, will spin it as like xenophobia against the Chinese. No, it's just a fact of life for that regime. You do not have a chance. You do not have a choice but to cooperate with what is basically like the Chinese CIA, who could tap you at any time, and say, you're involved in this project. We would like to know the ins and outs of it. We want to see plans for it. We want to see details for it. So, and that is, national security issue.
Absolutely. And so, when you go right up to the highest levels of the White House administration, with Kushner being a senior advisor, Kushner installing so many of these special interest big business types who see no problem with doing business with China, namely Tim Cook and Apple. Former Microsoft senior vice president Christopher Liddell is one of Kushner's top acolytes within the White House. and now Derek Lyons, who has been appointed domestic policy chief, who reportedly is the one, I think this is according to Ryan Gerdusky, who asked when in discussion about the immigration ban, said, well, what is Tim Cook going to think about this? And I think this is most important for your for your average American first rank and file MAGA Republican to understand, okay? Because most of us did not vote for Jared Kushner or his wife for president. Most of us did not vote for, Microsoft executives to be our president, and we certainly didn't vote for Tim Cook to be our president. And so, really digging into Kushner's role in promoting things like EB5, putting himself at blackmail risk, and his entire family, because as I had reported several years ago in Conservative Review, I think 3 or 4 years ago, Trump Bay State, which was being built by Kushner companies, was done with EB5 investments. And his sister, there's video, there's phone, there's photographs of the sister's presentation to these Chi-Com officials. And what you're saying is so important. It's a pretense that there are any private businesses partnering with American companies and real estate interests on EB5. So you've taken a look at other aspects of importing foreign workers into our country, and that it continues apace. We have this illusion that with the so-called immigration ban that had been announced 2 weeks ago, that the Trump administration was indeed putting American workers first, and yet at all parts of the wage scale, whether we're talking at the high end with EB5, F1, and H1B, or whether we're talking about the low end of the wage scale, that American workers are still getting screwed and undercut. So can you talk a little bit we have about 10 minutes left, about some of your work on H2A and H2B?
Yeah. First, can everyone hear? Because someone just messaged me and said the audio is cutting out. Can you guys hear us still? I'm looking at the comments. Anyone?
Yeah, that's great that you can, because I can't access them at all.
Okay, so, I guess it was just one person.
We're good?
Yeah, people are saying yes, that they can. Okay. So
fantastic.
So you touched a good thing with Lyons, and this will transition to the H2A thing. Lyons, first, Lyons is really close to Ivanka. This is a guy who increasingly has more control over immigration policy, who should not. This is someone who has their fingers in, or their eyes set on Silicon Valley. So I think that tells you what to expect from an administration where Lyons is in a position where he can kind of control access in terms of like ideas. I'm working on this, so I don't want to say too much because I plan to write about it. But so you're right about Lyons is not someone you want anywhere near the levers of power. Similarly, the Ag Secretary, Sonny Perdue, is he's a lobbyist for the immigration interests. So this is someone else who, you scratch your head. How did he get into Ag Secretary when this guy is someone who, while he was governor of his state, he had benefited from subsidies and from this industry. So what I wrote about in the New York Post was that there was an effort to, I guess I have to give some backstory. So for H2A workers, for people that employ them, there's something called the adverse effect wage rate. Basically, if you employ people under the H2A program, what this does is it prohibits you from paying them less than the rate that is established by what is the prevailing rate in the area, right? So it makes sure that people that hire guest laborers can't just pay them pennies. But it also applies to citizens. A lot of people don't know that. So make sure that people that are working in the farm industry can't just like kneecap the wages of both guest workers and American citizens and legal immigrants. Um, there have been people that have been pining after getting rid of the AEWR, or at least wounding it so that they can really undercut wages. That is something that has been happening since before the coronavirus. And the coronavirus happens, and now the ag lobby has an excuse, right? They're like, oh, wow, we need labor. And because we need labor so badly, we also have to give the term they used was wage relief. We have to give the people that employ guest laborers wage relief, which is like a euphemism for we have to allow them to pay people pennies, right? We have to relieve them,
Right.
and that's how like NPR ran with it. The Trump administration is bullying, guest laborers and wants to take away their wages, but that's the tip of the iceberg. If the AEWR is kneecapped, and you drive you're an American citizen who works for a guy that employs guest laborers, and you drive like a truck or like you're a mechanic on a tractor, it could also affect your wages. If you're like an American citizen who is like a supervisor at a farm that employs H-2A workers, it will affect your wages. This is like it's actually kind of complex, but the best way I can describe it is it's like throwing a rock into a pond and it has all these ripples, right? And all of those ripples are wages that will be slashed. So this thing is really bad news. And again, Sonny Perdue should not be anywhere near immigration policy, because something like this comes to him, he's going to pitch it to the president and argue, and go to bat for it.
Yeah. And what can you tell me about Mark Meadows' role in all of this? Because prior to him becoming chief of staff, it's my understanding that he too was a cheerleader and protector for exactly these kinds of programs.
Right. So Meadows, I think it's like you said, he's just kind of a cheerleader as far as I can tell. I don't know that he's some Machiavellian character, but I mean, Mark Meadows is probably not that unique because he's a Republican. He's like
right.
He's like a bushy. He strikes me as like a bushy Republican. So I mean, these guys are squishes on immigration. Again, this is someone who under pressure is probably going to give in to whatever lobbyist is squeezing him. So, for me, a higher priority is someone like Perdue, because Politico ran an article recently about how I think that the headline is Meadows learns to navigate Kushner's sprawling White House influence. Right, and it's like
I saw that this morning.
Right, and it's how do I say this? People like Kushner just steamroll guys like Meadows.
Yes.
Meadows is like a fart in a whirlwind in the White House, and it's not that Kushner has. It's at least as far as I can tell, and it's not like Kushner has a portfolio. He has access to whatever he wants. So what we I guess this is a roundabout way of saying we don't need we don't need any more guys like Meadows in the administration.
Yes, exactly. But here's what I think your average MAGA Fox News watching Republican who believes themselves to be America first and believes this administration to be doing everything it can to forward an America first agenda. This is what they need to understand, is that, it's a cliche that personnel is policy, right? And we've highlighted, we've talked about today in our short time together, Derek Lyons, who just so people understand, this is a Jeb Bush guy. This was right. He was a consigliere to the Jeb Bush presidential campaign, who is so ensconced in Bush world. His mentor was a guy named C. Boyden Gray, counsel to like every major Bush family member going back to George Herbert Walker Bush. And then he worked for Rob Portman, who was, one of the biggest squishes on immigration and open borders. So you've got them in the West Wing. You've got Sonny Perdue at Ag. You've got Pompeo at State, who was just as bad. And then you've got, the former lobbyist for NASCOM, the Indian outsourcing outfit, Chad Wolf, in charge of the Department of Homeland Security. It's like, the low energy Bushes have gotten the last laugh. Oh, right?
Yeah.
People need to understand this.
Yeah. No, you're right. The administration, and a question I get is, do you really think Trump doesn't know about this? And I think he knows about it, but I just don't think he really understands like the layers upon layers upon layers of maneuvering that are happening. But you're president of the United States, you're a busy guy. So by the time that things get to him from his personnel who he trusts or he would like to trust, by the time it gets to him, what he's looking at is not really what's going on. It's kind of, I guess people say it's a strength that Trump is a businessman because he's a straight talking, straight shooting guy. There is some truth to that, but everything in the swamp moves sideways. And so when Trump thinks he's looking at something head on, or when he shakes on a deal, he's not really shaking on the deal, if that kind of makes sense. And so personnel is huge. And I mean, for one reason or another, and I'm writing about this now, Trump is almost entirely surrounded by people who have been approved by like Jared Kushner. He's like been insulated. There's Stephen Miller, but Stephen Miller, as far as I can tell, he's got like a siege mentality. He's like locked in his corner of the White House, just trying to stay alive. It's not a good situation right now, not for people like us.
It's not, and yet we do have each other, and there's definitely strength in numbers, despite a lot of attempts to deplatform. I think some of the most important people in this movement. We're still able to get our message out, and what I want people to do is obviously follow you on Twitter, and you're at Emeriticus. Pronounce this for me.
Emeriticus. I just came up with it. Sorry.
Thank you. I love it. It's at EMERITICUS. All of your work is so invaluable. You can be found at American Greatness, where you're an assistant editor, you're a contributor to Chronicles, and you've been published widely and in many mainstream outlets. We obviously are so grateful to you for all the work that you do. And it's important that people follow the money and that people understand what it actually is going to take to drain the swamp. I think for the immediate agenda for America First, for me, there's two huge things. And one is doing everything that we can to push back against these insidious forces inside the White House to create public pressure to extend and expand the ban. I don't know if you saw this, but I joked that the ban should last at least as long as the temporary protective status has been renewed for the very first beneficiaries, which would be, I think, 17 or 18 years.
That's
right?
reasonable.
Right? We should
that seems right.
Right? We should have some equity on that. And then I think, and I would love to have you come back and do this. We've got to make this a regular feature. But I think it should be a huge focus as the Supreme Court gets ready to rule on DACA, because all these forces that we've been talking about have been waiting in the wings to foist a DACA quote unquote fix. That'll be carried largely by not just Democrats, but these open borders Republicans as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we have to stay on top of it.
We definitely do. Thank you so much, Pedro. And I want to let everybody know that tomorrow we're going to be having the fabulous ladies from the American Workers Coalition, who've been at the forefront of raising awareness on the F1 OPT racket. So that's it for us for today. Thank you again for joining us, Pedro, and I will see you guys tomorrow here live at the same time. Thanks.
All right. Bye.